Consider This, with host Carol Schrader, is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hi, and welcome once again to UNO. My guest this week is here because he is leaving one job and doesn't know quite all he's doing for his next job, but the job he's had is pretty significant. Tom Monahan has finished an 8-year stint as U.S. Attorney for Nebraska, was a Clinton appointee, and now the regime has changed. Yeah. When I asked you, well, how's it been? You said, it's been a long 8 years. Were you having a bad day then?
No. It's been a great job. And most former U.S. attorneys will tell you it's the best job they've ever had and the best job they ever will have. It's been a great time, and I've enjoyed it. And we've done some interesting things and hopefully made things better.
Now, being a reporter, I think some of the stories that I've covered or worked at places that have been big stories over the last 8 years is certainly the rise of production and sales of methamphetamine.
Absolutely.
And I don't think people understand how your office fits in with local law enforcement, because it's a statewide problem, multiple jurisdictions, and I suppose that's kind of a microcosm of how certain other kinds of investigations work, is how you would work on something like that. But how does meth work? Because you've got all these jurisdictions.
Let me see if I can tell you the story quickly.
Yeah.
We first became aware that meth was becoming a huge problem in Nebraska in 1996. It's when I took a trip outstate and talked to sheriffs and drug treatment people, other law enforcement folks, and I kept hearing the same thing over and over: meth. We think we have meth labs, we got all this meth cells. And I finally sunk in, and I came home and thought, what can we do as an office to try and make things better? Recognizing that it was not just a Nebraska problem. Kansas was having a problem, South Dakota, Iowa. We finally put together, first brought the state patrols together to see if we could get a handle on what was going on in terms of the transportation of it. And then we ended up bringing law enforcement, including U.S. attorneys, 17 other U.S. attorneys in the Midwest, and put together a strategy to stop it. And the first thing of the strategy was let the people know that there was a problem. So we spent a lot of time on TV talking about meth, which is why you and others were aware of it, and beginning to develop the process for putting together a stronger law enforcement program, because it was hitting rural areas, many of those areas really didn't have very large police forces, weren't used to fighting drugs in a big way out there. So we had to really help put together a process starting from the beginning and changing how we operated and how our U.S. Attorney's offices operated around the Midwest.
Now, I don't know if I even fully understand when you're dealing with a drug, like methamphetamine or cocaine or anything, and law enforcement finds they have a problem, or neighbors say they have a problem, and you go, now when does it become federal involvement?
Well, we typically take drug cases that will give a defendant a 5-year sentence. That doesn't mean they all get it, because if they cooperate, they can reduce their sentences a great deal. But we have jurisdiction for most drug cases, and we tend to take the bigger drug cases because there are bigger sentences in the federal system, and we have the grand jury that helps us do a better job of investigating as opposed to just catching somebody with drugs in their pocket. Often our cases don't have that, or there are historical cases where we've developed witnesses that have bought from people that have used drugs with these people and so forth.
And they're usually probably a little more widespread in terms of a bit of a web, as opposed to just some guy gets some ammonia and some ephedrine and mixes it up together. And
we tend to do the manufacturers, which in our part of the country it's typically methamphetamine, or the wholesalers, the ones that bring it in from someplace else and engage the street level dealers. The street level dealers typically are prosecuted by the state, and the users are, if caught, are prosecuted by the state, but we do the larger scale folks.
And I suppose one of the advantages of having the U.S. Attorney's Office involved is the expertise of the prosecutors.
Right.
The whole, not just the investigation part of it, but you know, some of these areas, as you said, don't have as much law enforcement. They have probably excellent judges and prosecutors locally, but they have to do everything.
That's correct. One of the things we were finding is that a lot of the state judges were granting probation to people that if we'd have done more searching on and provided more information to the court, they would have done a longer period of time. But in the federal system, no parole. You know, the time that you're sentenced is the time you're going to serve, which is different in the state system. What we've attempted to do is bring law enforcement together to work cooperatively and work at a goal of wiping out certain organizations. But we've also taken a look at demand. If we don't do something about demand in this country, it doesn't make any difference how good law enforcement operates, how good a U.S. attorney you have, how good a judges you have. People are still going to be selling drugs because there are people out there that are going to be willing to pay a lot of money for it. So we've spent a lot of time in demand. One of the things we did in '97 was put together public service announcements. You've seen some of them. You helped us figure out how to get it on the media. So that's some of the things that this office has done in the last few years.
When you took this office, I mean, having been a lawyer and attorney in this community for a long time, having just been one of those guys that's been around, you're kind of
a good thing?
No, yeah, you're kind of just always in the know.
Okay.
You know a lot of people. You're pretty well connected.
Yeah.
Kind of an active Democrat. You know, having held the party helm. But so you knew what you were getting into, I suppose.
Yeah,
with the
to
job.
somewhat.
But what was the unsomewhat, the other stuff that you?
Well,
that
the
you didn't know?
easiest thing to learn was how to be a prosecutor, because a good prosecutor is a good lawyer, and a good lawyer can learn how to do that, and you can learn how to, if you know how to practice law, you can learn how to prosecute. So that wasn't very hard. I remember saying in meetings thinking that I don't have the political skills for this job. And you say quizzically, well, you were engaged in politics. This was a different type of job. You had to bring very disparate groups together and get them to agree on a goal and then get them moving that way on a goal. And it took a lot of skill, and there were times that I wished I'd had more skill and had been better at bringing people together and trying to get them to agree on things.
What do you mean by different people? Your staff, jurisdiction,
Oh,
different
no,
jurisdictions?
No, the staff, you know, they don't salute, but they might as well. I mean, I have a very good staff, and they were very helpful. No, I think it's important to get the community involved, especially in prevention. That was difficult because there's some mistrust of government in this state. I'm sure that's not a surprise to most people. There's a distrust of law enforcement. There's a distrust of prosecutors. We had to prove ourselves. We had to encourage people to work with us. Then we had to convince them that their ideas could were achievable, that our ideas were achievable, and get people to work together. You know, we dealt with a lot of different law enforcement agencies and a lot of different prosecutorial agencies, some of which I had the authority to direct, but some of which I don't have the authority to direct. We tried to change the press policy so that we had a more coherent message coming out of our office, and a message that we spoke more often and provided more information to the community, but we did it within the framework of rules. That was difficult for some law enforcement agencies. They didn't particularly like that initially.
One of the things when you talk about, and I think that overall you could get an answer from your office pretty easily. Boy, you spewed out news releases, and I don't mean those kind of pap things that, you know, are sucking up to the media to get coverage. What I meant is you kept, when you had an indictment, you know, what the charges were or what the indictments were, they were out, they were clear, they were concise. The one thing I remember, though, in your 8 years calling you about, and to this day, I mean, no one's ever said for sure, and with the execution of Timothy McVeigh looming, the man who was, at least in part, responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing, the question, and I wasn't the only one to call it, said, I understand there's a rumor that Timothy McVeigh and or his compatriots were scouting out the Omaha Federal Building.
Well, I'm not going to dodge your question, although I know how.
I know you know
I'm
how.
not going to dodge
but
it.
you dodged it real well then.
Well,
And-
but let me- but let
we
me-
both knew what was happening. That was a security thing.
Let me tell you my press policy and philosophy. We did send out a lot of press releases because I think it's our obligation as the chief federal law enforcement officer in the state to provide the community with information as to what's going on, thus providing information to the media. We also have 3 sets of rules that we had to follow. And they're sometimes conflicting and they're sometimes difficult because we had to make sure that we were able to prosecute the people that did bad things, and we didn't want to lose cases because we had told the press too much or that there was an environment that an individual would not get a fair trial. So we kept control of the press information to a much larger extent than you guys liked, and often a much larger extent that the other media, that the other law enforcement agencies liked. Because many of them were used to calling up their buddies and saying, hey, we got a good thing that's going to get us some publicity, come see us. Well, that's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't work within a framework that we were trying to operate in, which was providing information and yet doing it appropriately. As to when people were coming to Omaha, there were lots of rumors. And the only thing that I knew was rumors, and the last thing we wanted to do was make things worse in this community, because there were a lot of people afraid, including law enforcement agencies, who felt that they were being targeted, that their office was being looked at, and there were sketches of people that supposedly came and looked at the old federal building and scouted it out. I was never able to verify that very well, at least at the time I was being asked, and I was not going to portray any information that I knew that was simply a rumor or that I couldn't verify. So,
And at the time, I would not, I guess part of me was saying, you know, you're not going to get an answer to this because this is too fresh, too hot, too many things could still happen. We're still, every federal building in the country is being, getting extra attention and extra security.
Right.
But do we know now?
I've been told, and I haven't seen it, but I've been told that McVeigh admitted at some point, either during the trial or after the trial, that one of the cities they looked at was Omaha. But what facility they looked at, I don't know. But
So the rumors were before he was convicted, and then
That's
after
right.
convicted, he did concede. Maybe he was showboating, or I mean, you don't even know.
I don't know.
If he was,
I don't know.
If you would have
but-
said any 10 cities, he said, "Sure, we were."
But one of the things I was trying to do is, one, make sure that the people in federal buildings were safe, and we had several meetings that we never talked about to bring people together to say, all right, what are your fears, or what do you think has happened? And you know, now you see security guards at buildings that weren't there before.
Yeah,
The
no, we can't take our cameras in the courthouse, the new
well,
courthouse.
the second thing I was trying to do is to make sure that Timothy McVeigh didn't take away all of our freedoms. And he was doing that because people were so afraid that they were then going to have a secured courthouse. That meant people couldn't come see me as easily as they ought to, and they couldn't come see the courts, and that takes away all of our freedoms. And so I was trying to keep that from happening at the same time.
So, of course, you were involved in the security for the new courthouse. To what degree the judges sort of have.
Until it became clear that I wasn't going to be in it, and then I left it to the marshals.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you feel that it's an open atmosphere down there? And I'm not talking from a news
no.
media point of view, because
No.
I can understand them not wanting to check cameras or not have them in. But I walked in there the other day for the first time, and I felt a different feeling than the federal building. Now, I don't know if it's because of all the scare, or this was an opportunity to lock it down a little better.
Well, the judges had always complained that security was really bad in the Zorinsky building. But the nice thing about the Zorinsky building was that it was part of the community. There were other offices in there, the Corps of Engineers, there was activity, there were people around. Now,
The post office down there.
Now you go to the federal courthouse and you could shoot a cannon off and not hit anybody. You don't want to shoot a cannon off there, and you're not going to be able to get in with a cannon to do that, but there's nobody there. And I think that we're changing the way we operate in government, and it's not good. It's certainly safer for the people that work there, and that's good, but we've so removed ourselves from the community because we're so security conscious that we've taken away some of the freedoms for the community and for us.
And that then, some of the distrust of government, that's not going to help
No,
that situation.
That's not going to help. When you don't have access to the courtrooms and to the judges and to the participants and to the lawyers, that makes makes people much more distrustful, and it creates conspiracy theorists and so forth, and that's not good.
Speaking of conspiracies, there are all kinds of crimes that involve conspiracies, and do you have any favorite one that happened on your watch that you prosecuted, or?
Well, it's hard to say you have a favorite prosecution.
Well, no, I mean, like, what was the best crime? No,
Yeah.
do you have something that challenged you and your staff, and they came out on top, or they?
Well, I think the prosecution of Judge Whitehead, the judge in Columbus, was probably the most challenging, because you wanted to make sure of two things. One, that you weren't going to be extra hard on this individual because he was a judge. You wanted to make sure you weren't being extra lenient because he was a judge. It was finding
Refresh everybody's
the
memory about.
judge was accused of doing two things: check kiting, which is writing checks when you don't have the money and doing it in a pattern, so that you're always borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and you're essentially borrowing money from a bank. The second was bank fraud, getting deals with banks based upon the information that he gave to the banks that wasn't truthful. And we ended up convicting the judge on both counts. Judge Shanahan was reversed on one count, the bank fraud. By that time, Judge Whitehead had served his sentence, essentially, and we declined to proceed again. But because he had essentially been punished and taken off the bench and disbarred, and so we didn't go forward. But that was a very difficult case and a very hard case.
The judge that has to do that, that has to preside over that, that's kind of a difficult situation too. I mean, you must have observed certainly among the judicial world, because that's kind of a fraternity. Obviously, they don't want people out doing bad things amongst their own group. But
well, this is a small state. It's a pretty well-known. The bar knows each other. I happened to go to my 25th law school reunion the night that the verdict came back from the jury, and I remember checking in to the place where the reunion was, and one of my friend's wives come up to me and says, "Do you have any news? What happened to my good friend Judge Whitehead?" And, so there were supporters on both sides. It was a very difficult situation, a very sad situation. He'd performed as a judge for a while, and it's sad when that happens.
did you get involved in any prosecutions of computer crimes, white-collar crime
Yep.
of note? Anything interesting, challenging?
Yeah, they were. We did some child pornography cases, which I think is a difficult area. We did some other computer hacking cases. We tried to do a lot of white-collar and really work to try and make sure the law enforcement agencies use their resources appropriately so that we could do more white-collar, because we thought that there was a lot out here. We've done some healthcare cases. There are not a lot in Nebraska.
What do you mean by health care
Well,
cases?
when health providers are defrauding the government or defrauding the individual patients, mostly the government, those are also difficult cases, because they're sometimes there are a lot of little thefts, but they're small amount, kind of chiseling crimes, and we did some of those, and those are important to do, because one of our functions is to make sure that people have faith in this system, that they know when they go to a doctor, that they know they go to a business, when they go to a bank, that they're going to be treated fairly, and they can trust the society we live in. And that's one of the functions of our job.
One of the things I think that involves or comes out of people's distrust or causes people's distrust is they feel that corporations will never get caught, that it's just people that get caught.
That's
And corporate crime, I'm not saying it's running rampant, but it's hard to find, or crime within corporations, or bad guys within corporations. That's a hard one, because they have all these this technical wizardry. They're 10 steps above law enforcement, and probably in the ability to.
They shouldn't be ahead of us in the federal government. Sometimes they are. One of the things that I wanted to make sure is that our office didn't prosecute just the easy cases, that we were willing to lose a case, and we've lost some. We prosecuted Hudson Beef and lost for lying to the government during the E. coli scare in Columbus. If we had to try that case over again, we'd try it over again. We would hope that we'd get a conviction this time. We might try and do it better, but we lost some cases, but that was a case that I think was important to pursue. We've done other cases against packing companies. We've done some against on immigration, and we've done some on pollution, on environmental cases. We just recently negotiated $1 million fine from a corporation. We prosecuted some of the employees, so we worked at that. There's more work to do, but you're right, that's important things for our office to engage in, because nobody really else has the resources but us to do those cases.
And some of those things stretch across state borders, and so, I mean, if you have to do it.
That's right.
Because everybody else is putting out their own fires in their own states and jurisdictions.
That's right. I think people don't always recognize that county attorneys' offices are a very reactive office. When the police catch somebody in the act, or somebody comes to them and says, I've just seen this crime, that comes to a county attorney's office and they prosecute immediately. We have the luxury of being able to put together a case and taking some information from this person and this person and this person, submitting it to a grand jury, and be more investigative and can be more proactive than a county attorney's office. And our caseload's smaller, so that we have a lot more freedom, and we need to make sure that we use those assets and that freedom appropriately.
In your 8 years, what are you proudest of?
I think engaging the community in the fight against drugs and the fight against violence. Project Impact that we've talked about some, which is really trying to engage the community and engage various law enforcement agencies to look at the issue of violence a little differently than what we've done before. I'm very proud of that. I think what we've done in the meth area and our beginning in the ecstasy area and the other drug arenas, where we simply don't look at it as a law enforcement problem. We look at it more comprehensively as a community problem, and we engage the community in it. We engage the healthcare community and the public into solving the problem. I think that's the direction our office needs to go more.
That, I don't know what other U.S. attorneys do in other states, but in the 8 years that you were in, I think maybe they were just on the verge of that when you came in, of U.S. attorneys being a lot more public. I mean, we didn't really know what they did. We didn't pay much attention. Do you think that that's good? I mean, it goes along with your philosophy, but...
Absolutely, and we had a great teacher and motivator in Janet Reno, because Reno had operated that way in Miami when she was in the county attorney's office, and she really encouraged us. And there were some great U.S. attorneys in my class. The fellow by the name of Don Stern from Boston helped lower the homicide rate from 150 a year to 45. They went 2 years without a youth-related homicide, and before, the newspaper was keeping a box score on the front page. My friend Walter Holton in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I mean, they had one of the cities that he worked on in youth violence made him a citizen of the day, you know, because of what he had done. And so a lot of really good U.S. attorneys reached out to the community. What we used to say in our office was that in Omaha there are great people doing great things, often in isolation, and if we can bring them together and help them provide an environment so that they could work collaboratively, this community would be so much better. We've done that a lot. University of Nebraska at Omaha has helped us a lot. At times the city has helped us, at times the state has helped us bring all this together. They're really talented people trying to make our community better, and often have a very difficult time doing it.
Did you find many partisan battles?
No.
I mean,
No.
you were a I mean, it's a partisan
Sure.
appointment. It's traditionally, you know, in the old school politics, boy, you know, I mean, it would shift every 4 or 8 years, and that's the way it was, and those are who the people you hired.
Right.
And
I think there are a lot of people that looked at me and saw a liberal Democrat. And some of them thought that was a good thing, by the way. Not all of them thought it was a bad.
a few, I
yeah.
imagine.
But I had a number of law enforcement people come up to me and say, we were really worried about you when we got the job, and we're really happy with what you're doing, and the direction you're taking us and the leadership that you're providing. But I don't think I got accused after the first year of being a partisan anything. I think I got accused of correctly of trying to make the community a better place to live, and making law enforcement more effective, and making sure that our office was there to help people, to help resolve crime problems, to try and bring the crime numbers down, and make this a safer and better community.
All right, you move out of that post on April 20th, and your successor is Mike Heavican, who has experience in the office.
Yep.
What do you think? I won't ask you if you think he's a good guy. He's worked with you.
Well, I'll tell you that. He was one of my supervisors. He was the first assistant when I joined. I brought somebody else in to do that job, but he stayed on the drug side. He's been a very important partner of mine in the office. I think he'll do a fine job.
What do you feel are his biggest challenges ahead? You know, you look at, you're winding up, what's still there, or what new looms on the horizon?
Well, I think he's going to have to figure out what direction he wants to take the office, and have the interest and courage to keep going. And I think he'll be fine. He'll be a very good U.S. attorney, and you'll forget about me in another 6 months or so.
Well, I guess I won't forget about you just because I won't, but will the community have an opportunity not to forget about you? What are you going to do?
I hope so. I hope to do a number of different things. I'm going to start an office. I'm going to practice law. I hope to build a law firm. I hope your viewers come hire me. Is that too blatant?
We advertise on public television?
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm also going to work for University of Nebraska at Omaha because I want to stay involved in crime prevention and improving the system, and they've asked me to come do that and work on grants with them. I'm going to do that. I may do some other things. I need to make some money, and I'm going to practice law, and I've enjoyed that. That's what I did before, and I hope to represent people as they deal with our government. I think I've learned something about it.
We have 30 seconds. If, as retiring
Retiring
isn't the right word.
I'm a little young to retire.
As the outgoing
Yeah.
U.S. attorney, if you could have one wish tomorrow to make the world a safer place.
I'd stay 4 more years.
What would it be? What could happen tomorrow? What would you do if you could just turn a key?
Well, if we could make people understand the dangers of drugs and the dangers of violence, and could learn to live cooperatively, I think that would be a wonderful thing to do.
Well, we can't forget that. We've got to keep that out in front. Thanks a lot. Tom Monahan, thank you for joining us on Consider This. Hey, good luck to you.
Thanks.
Consider This, with host Carol Schrader, is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television.